What are the best vegetables for diabetics? I'll not only give you my top 3, but the criteria used to determine that important list. These are not only the healthiest, but they are also low in carbohydrates, and they are rich in vitamins and minerals, fiber, and antioxidants. These are my go-to everyday staple of carbohydrate sources that easily keep my blood sugars low and controlled, and my A1C in the mid to low 5s. But most importantly, aids in keeping me strong and energetic all day long. But before we begin, let me welcome all you resilient diabetics out there. This is the channel we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into extraordinarily well-controlled diabetics. If you don't know who I am and you are brand new to my channel, I welcome you. My name is Sampat, and I am an insulin-dependent diabetic diagnosed a little over 6 years ago. So the proud owner of a pancreas that's gone on a permanent and lifelong vacation. So not only am I diabetic, just like you, where we will be walking that walk and talking that talk together, but I do also have a Bachelor of Science degree in nutrition dietetics, and that comes in very handy in discussing all the intricacies of being a diabetic. My goal is to put 4 years of chemistry, biochemistry, organic chemistry, and human physiology into around a 10-minute or so presentation so that you know about how your diabetic body works better than, dare I say, your doctor? I just did. The unique information presented today will only be found here on this channel, The Resilient Diabetic. New, life-changing episodes are released and published weekly. So if you want to learn more and you want to be notified by YouTube that a new video has been published, then the only way to do that is to first hit that subscribe button, followed by the gray notification bell. Then choose turn on all notifications. And of course, if you liked what you've heard and saw today, please hit that like button. Before we get to the top of the list, we first have to discuss the criteria needed to make the list. First and foremost, it has to be based on availability. It has to always be available year-round. There's no point in making this list unless it's easy to find and convenient to purchase. 2, it has to be nutrient dense. As diabetics, nutrient density is one of the single most important terms to know and understand. What is nutrient density? Nutrient density is the ratio of nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants, to calories that a food supplies when it's eaten. Foods that supply a significant amount of one or more nutrients compared to the number of calories they supply are called nutrient dense. Nutrient dense foods help you get the important nutrients without the excessive calories. But in our case, we need foods that are both high in nutrients but are low in carbohydrates. And this is where, if you've been following me and you are subscribed, and I know you are, that you've seen the video on sweet potatoes. That is where I compare and contrast sweet potatoes to carrots to see which one is a true diabetic superfood. And I will put a link in the description box to that very important video. Here's a very interesting note for you. If we here in the United States were to receive a report card rating the quality of the standard American diet, it would get an F for nutrient density. Despite being very, very high in calories, the standard American diet is actually nutrient poor. It is full of what I call the true silent killers: vegetable oils and refined sugars, which together comprise of around 35 to 40% of the standard American diet. Thus, it's not only void of most nutrients, but what is worse, it is highly, highly inflammatory. Third on our criteria is the cost. There are some great choices out there, which also depends on the seasons, where you live, and the supply demand of that vegetable will ultimately determine that price. So we want vegetables that are easy to find and fit within a reasonable budget. So I'll give you a great example of a vegetable that can easily be on the list if it was not for its price in certain areas. Asparagus. Yes, asparagus. Asparagus, even on sale in my area, is twice that of other vegetables. Why is that? Well, for a couple of reasons. Asparagus is actually hard to grow and for the farmer doesn't produce any stalks for a first couple of years. So not only is it both very labor intensive, but once cut, they must be sold very quickly to preserve the freshness or they will dry out. All this costs money. The asparagus that I did buy the last time that was on sale went bad really quickly. Fourth, the fiber content. We discussed fiber in the episode Can Diabetics Eat Beans? We covered in detail the two types of fibers and most importantly, what science has now just discovered. And that is certain fibers through the help of our gut bacteria produce these very powerful antioxidants called, if you remember, short-chain fatty acids. They not only improve our health, but they increase our insulin sensitivity. And I will also put a link in the description box for that video too. And if you haven't noticed, each video I produce for you is actually a building block for the very next one. Lastly, most importantly to us diabetics, vegetables that give us the greatest blood sugar control. The greater the blood sugar control, the greater our health. There are vegetables that are also very high in nutrients like sweet potatoes, but are loaded with carbohydrates. And for many of us diabetics, foods like starchy carbs, breads, grains, rice produce a substantial need for more insulin to be either taken or to be produced by our bodies. This in turn produces inflammation within our bodies due to the excessive amounts of insulin floating around. Back to that episode, Can Diabetics Eat Sweet Potatoes? We explored the notion that there is a part of society that can actually eat a higher amount of carbohydrates and remain relatively healthy. They make up around 15 to 20% of the population. This insulin-sensitive group are the ones that are used as the examples for our established governing associations like the American Diabetes Association. The rest of us diabetics are seeing this disconnect in the real world. We cannot eat oats and brown rice and breads at every single meal, plus the additional snacks that are recommended, and control our blood sugars for optimal health. There is a swelling movement of diabetics who note this in the trenches, especially if you frequent many of the internet help diabetic forums. This is especially true for the type 2 diabetics who want to come off all medications. But the establishment cannot recommend a lower carb diet, not even for diabetics, for fear of their accreditations and their jobs. The lower carb model is a threat to the old world order. It's a business threat that upsets the profit model these institutions were built on. So let me repeat this really important point. The ADA recommends adults with diabetes consume around 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrates per meal, which adds up to around 135 to 180 grams of carbohydrates per day. And their justification for foods like sweet potatoes and whole grain breads, they still believe the micronutrient benefits offsets the impact on elevated blood sugar levels. What would happen to me as a diabetic if I followed that advice? Which also happens to fall in line with what I was taught in my nutrition dietetics program to specifically treat diabetic patients. And for many of you, what your nutritional advisor may be suggesting. And I can easily break this down for you because I tried the exact same thing when I was first diagnosed. And it was a complete and utter disaster. I would need twice to 3 times the amount of insulin. Patients with type 1 diabetes or a type 1.5 LADA with no pancreatic functioning like myself typically requires an insulin dose of around 0.4 to 1 unit per kilogram per day. For me, at around 172 pounds, that would come out to around 32 to around 80 IU per day. And that is what I needed, but on the upper end of that scale. And keep this in mind. This is on top of me exercising twice a day and taking metformin, which are 2 very powerful sensitizers to insulin. I was doing everything right. Why? Because my blood sugars were decently controlled. The higher insulin requirements kept me controlled and reflected a good A1C, but that was half the picture. The most important half was completely missed by everyone. The higher carb intake, thus insulin requirements, brought on an ever-sickening body, even though I was eating very healthy foods like sweet potatoes and quinoa. No sodas, no refined carbs, or junk food. All the wholesome carb sources recommended by our experts. So then what happened? My cholesterol levels went through the roof. My HDL levels dropped. My triglycerides went up. My blood pressure surged. And I was packing on body fat. I was then put on more meds, including the dreaded statins, which is the medication that personally worried me the most because it hurt me the most. It created severe muscle aches and pains that I would not wish on my worst enemy, let alone the biggest insult to injury. It actually created more resistance, thus requiring more insulin. It was raising my blood sugars. Absolute insanity. I quickly did an about face. This madness had to stop. I immediately realized the lower my insulin requirements, the better my health. My body would start to heal itself and reverse all the damage that was done once I made this move. The first thing I did was to severely limit all starchy carbs and consume small amounts of fruit to only the days that I train with weights. The starchy and any dense carb sources were replaced with outsized large portions of above ground vegetables. That change dropped my insulin requirements from a peak of around 40 or 50 IU per day to around 17 to 22 per day. And that is half of what is needed at the bottom end of that recommended scale. So then what happened? My cholesterol levels dropped. My HDL levels went back up again. My triglycerides dropped. My blood pressure dropped. My weight dropped. Body fat came flying back off. And then my sensitivity to insulin skyrocketed. This exact low-carb diet allowed me to look like this. I have the energy levels to train 6 days a week, and intensely, I might add, while also working 7 days a week, and I feel great all day long. This is what I call the Resilient Diabetic diet, or what I would also call the anti-inflammatory diet. But before we get into the top 3, I have an additional goal for you. I want you to be able to create your own anti-inflammatory diet using the above criteria, but with a few more added measures and standards. That way, based on where you are from, you can substitute any of the above ground vegetables for another. The other reason for this measure is satiety. Unlike other certain recommended carbs where you only get to eat a very small portion, then that leads you to be hungry, this allows you to eat outsized large portions to keep you full and satisfied. So, 1 cup of these above ground vegetables needs to be under 50 calories. It has to have 3 or more grams of fiber with less than 10 grams of carbs. That is our standard. Pause the video and write that down. Now let's get to our list. In third place, drum roll please, it's green beans. Now, green beans are not part of the cruciferous vegetable family. I like to think of green beans as more of a crossover food that can provide you some of the great nutrient benefits that are reserved for beans and legumes. The bonus, it has strong benefits more closely associated with vegetables. Unlike their very close relatives in the dried bean category, green beans are lighter weight and lessly dense packed with carbohydrates. So 1 cup serving of cooked, remember I said the word cooked here, of green beans will provide around 45 calories, 10 grams of carbs. By contrast, 1 cup of black beans will provide around 225 calories and 40 grams of carbs. So with green beans, you're getting a lighter, lower calorie food, yet you're still getting all the key nutrient benefits that are associated with beans and legumes. So 1 standard cup of green beans contains around 30 calories, 6 grams of carbs, 2.6 grams of fiber, and around 1.5 grams of protein. Second and first place finishers will go to vegetables that are part of the cruciferae family. These are what's known as the cool weather vegetables. They are so called this because they have 4 petals that resemble basically a cross. Cruciferous vegetables are a diverse group. And I'll give you a brief list first because depending on where you are, many of these on the list are interchangeable. Half of my viewership comes from here in the States, but the other half comes from around the world. So what may be available and cheap for me may be just the opposite for you. So I'll give you the list. The list includes broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, bok choy, arugula, Brussels sprouts, collards, watercress, and radishes. Now that you've got the list, I will continue on with my second place finisher, and that goes to cauliflower. Cauliflower is very low in calories, yet is very high in vitamins. In fact, cauliflower contains almost every vitamin and mineral you would need, but cauliflower also provides a significant amount of protective antioxidants at the same time. I could do about a 30-minute video just on the nutrient benefits cruciferous vegetables have and the positive impact it has on our bodies, but that is not the scope of today's video. Cauliflower raw, usually around 1 cup, contains around 25 calories, 5 grams of carbs, and around 3 grams of fiber. And now on to our first place finisher. And what would that be? Broccoli. Yes, broccoli is also incredibly high in many of the nutrients, including fiber, vitamin C, vitamin K, iron, and potassium. It also boasts more protein than most other vegetables, around 3 grams. Broccoli has one of the highest levels of antioxidants of any vegetables on a per calorie basis. This food is a powerhouse, chock full of healing and body protective elements. Raw broccoli contains around 90% water, 7% carbs, and around 3% protein. 1 cup of raw chopped broccoli contains around 31 calories, 6 grams of carbs, and around 2.6 grams of fiber. The joy of eating these vegetables is that you get to eat the vegetables. Not these small serving sizes, but ones that I want you to really fill up on. I no longer pull out that measuring cup for any of these cruciferous vegetables, like I would if I were about to eat rice or potatoes or even quinoa. I just pile them high on my plate and I enjoy them. I just eat them with very little worry towards blood sugar control. Just a couple of last points. If you can, choose fresh or even frozen. Canned vegetables are fine. Just look for the ones without sodium, fats, or sugar added. You must read the label when you buy a canned vegetables. If it is canned and it's cheap and it's the only option available to you and it does have sodium, what you're going to want to do is to drain the vegetables and rinse them with water to decrease how much sodium is left on the vegetables. Now, I will create an important playlist for you with more videos related to blood sugar control and the foods we as diabetics can either eat or drink. In the playlist, you will find those 2 videos I highly recommend watching. Can diabetics eat sweet potatoes? And can diabetics eat beans? If you're new, there are tons more episodes like, are eggs good for diabetics? What about sweeteners like sugar alcohols? If you're on a desktop or laptop, use that mouse to click that box. If you're on a mobile device, tap that with your fingers. So have a great and productive day, and we'll see you soon with another new episode, which, like I've said, are released weekly. Bye for now.